Hi, you guys. Welcome back. So, for those of you who are new, my name is Shannon. Today, I want to invite you into a little bit of my story. And the reason why I'm sharing this is to show you guys the importance of allowing, of healing, of moving through the repressed emotional energy and moving through our traumas so that we can become the best and brightest versions of ourselves. And so I'm going to briefly run you through a bit of my life, just kind of skimming, and then explain to you what happened to me and sort of my process of allowing and why that was the only way for me to truly go into any form of healing, and why it's important for you to also do the somatic work and not just mental work when it comes to healing your body or your mind. So, when I was a child, I was raised in a very tumultuous environment. My very first memories were that of my father, who was angry. He would fly off the handle all the time. I just remember myself being scared. Like I was walking on eggshells already at 2 and 3 and 4 years old. And so he was verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, and sometimes physically abusive. My mother was a very young mom. She, doing the best she could, tried to um, instill what she could in me. But a lot of the focus was on like housekeeping and responsibility. And there wasn't much of like one-on-one time of like play or spending time with her. So I felt very neglected and alone. My dad was only in my life until I was 4, and then he left. And when he left, I felt this huge sense of relief. Although I, from a young age, started biting my nails. So my nails growing up were very short, like too short. But I didn't feel traumatized. I felt always different from other kids, from day one. And I'll go into that in another story. But as far as my family environment, a lot of times we can be brought up in tumultuous households and still feel like, oh, I'm okay. I'm fine. It wasn't that bad. We can make excuses for what we went through because we don't really realize the impact that it has on us until we're much older. So my teen years were really hard. I felt abandoned. I felt like I had to essentially raise myself. I had a lot of responsibility and issues of like rebellion towards my mother. So that was tricky. And then going into like my late teens, early 20s, and through my 20s, I attracted a lot of really abusive, narcissistic relationships. And all the while, I was still like, I'm okay. I got this. Didn't really see the patterns. I didn't see the trauma. I didn't see the effect that these things had on me in my life. I was still very blind to psychology, to generational curses. I always had a really incredibly close relationship with God. I functioned out of like love and light all the time. Like, how can I help people? How can I stand up for people? Like, I had this really strong sense of justice and morality and love and compassion and empathy for other people. And so that is where that really strong guidance and connection sort of developed with God, with the divine. Which was a great blessing in my life. I found myself to be very lucky in a lot of scenarios. I narrowly escaped a lot of really horrifying circumstances and situations. I always felt super protected, which gave me a sense of like strength in my life. But as I got older and the abusive relationships, they weren't like short lived. They were like 4 years and then almost 10 years. And then I got into addiction, and that was for like a year and a half, 2 years. And so I didn't realize that addiction was my system's way of attempting to cope with everything that I had lived through to that moment. It was a sense of escape from something that I didn't know how to pinpoint. I didn't know how to fix. I didn't know how to heal. I didn't understand what was going on in my system. But the addiction, I feel, was a sense of stability and groundedness that I didn't have in my life up until that time, until it became another thing I had to overcome, another thing I had to hurdle in my life. And so I really leaned on God to get me sober and to get me to a good place again. Then I felt this sense of like, oh, I'm starting to learn what narcissism is. I felt more readily equipped. I got clean. My life was on a good path. And then I found myself in another almost 10-year relationship that was equally as abusing, if not more. And it was more hidden, more covert. So I didn't really see it coming. I didn't see it happening as it was happening. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was handling it until I couldn't. And this relationship was not physically abusive at all. No physical abuse. However, it was highly emotionally abusive. Lots of manipulation, gaslighting, confusion. It was verbally abusive. So yelling, screaming, name calling, anger outbursts. It was financially abusive at times. It was spiritually abusive, and it was sexually abusive. And so in this relationship, I remember initially I was like, I found my person. I found a very seemingly like a good match. They tended to mirror back a lot of my qualities. And so it was very different from the previous abuse that I had endured or overcome in my life up until that point. And it was so hard on me that eventually my mental health collapsed. And this was about 7 years in, I want to say, about 7 years in. And my mental health totally disintegrated. I went into what felt like almost like psychosis, like complete inability to control my mind. And so what it felt like was happening was it felt like I was being demonically attacked in my mind, because my thoughts went from normal to like very worrisome over time and like lots of fear to total annihilation. And this was where my thoughts became very aggressive, very angry, very hateful towards myself and towards other people that had abused me in the past and currently. And so this was the most terrifying experience I had ever had. And it took me a lot of months of praying, fasting, searching, crying out to God, trying everything that I could possibly try to heal or fix myself without therapy, without the help of anyone else, to restore what had happened in my mind. Well, as my mind began to further fall apart, my body followed suit. And over the course of, it's been like a 3-year period, I had to fix not only my mental health, but begin to heal my physical health. So as my mental health was still falling apart, my physical health, like I said, disintegrated along with it. And symptoms that I noticed, I had everything. It was like a full system shutdown. Rashes, skin rashes, allergies to different foods, gut issues, extremely horrific back pain, like joint pain in my back, an inability to sleep well. I had, anemia, weight loss. I have them all written down in a book. So many issues. It felt like I was dying. And God was giving me, because I'm a dreamer, He was giving me dreams and guiding me through this entire process the entire time. And so eventually I was led to not only specific diet changes that I needed to make, but doctors weren't really giving me clear answers as to what was going on. I knew this had something to do with all the trauma I had been through and the mental breakdown, so I knew that those things played a part in the physical breakdown of my body. And so I was desperately searching for answers on how to heal, how to come out of it, and also like what was going on with my body. Because about a year prior to this, I had had a dream that had informed me that eating sugar was no longer safe. And so I had made the diet changes and was doing what I could in the physical, but I knew it was going to take more than that. And all of the praying, all of the fasting and the warfare, battling warfare, doing all of these things was not making much of a difference. And so I had asked God over and over again, like, just guide me to what I need to know. And I was guided to allowing. I was guided to like mind body conditions. And previous to being led to this information, God did give me a dream. And in the dream were the words non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This absolutely terrified me, which kept me pursuing doctors and trying to get diagnosed, which I was never able to do. And then eventually all of the doctor's visits were making me feel like I was crazy, like something wasn't really wrong with me. And so I decided no matter what is going on with me, if it's cancer, if it's autoimmune, no matter what it is that I'm facing, and then the mental health stuff, I knew it was all interconnected. I knew there was a way out of it. And I knew that what had triggered me into that state held the key as to what was going to get me out of it. So this is when God eventually led me into allowing. So I started learning about mind-body conditions. I started learning about how trauma was stored in the body and how this leads to mental breakdown and physical breakdown. And so I want to sort of explain how it happens to you because I shared a bit of my story with you. So imagine your body is a container. And your brain, or not your brain, your mind, your psyche is connected to this container. Now, as we go through life, negative experiences, traumatic experiences begin to fill this container with beliefs, with thoughts, with ideas, and also with repressed emotions. So, what are repressed emotions? I want you to think about, let's say you made a mistake as a child and you did something by accident, but you were yelled and screamed at and made to feel like you did it on purpose. Well, this might have triggered anger in you because you knew you didn't do anything on purpose. It was an accident. But the anger is there. However, you're not allowed to express the anger because expressing the anger might make you unsafe. It might get you disciplined. You might get physical punishment. You might be yelled and screamed at. You might be grounded, whatever it might be. So you learned pretty young that it wasn't safe to express all of your emotions. And you also learned it wasn't totally safe to express all of who you are. So if you were a really energized, vivacious child who was super joyful, and you had parents who were incredibly depressed or angry all the time, you might have found that when you were really joyful, they yelled at you, they demeaned you, they made you feel terrible about yourself. And so you might have learned that being joyful is not safe. It comes with consequences. And so you've learned to put those vivacious, fun-loving parts of yourself in that container and shut it away. So you go through your life, you're collecting all of these different experiences, and your container begins to fill more and more and more. And depending on how many situations, how many circumstances we go through in life, it's sort of like dictating how much material is put into our containers. Well, by the time my mental health fell apart, my container was at full capacity. Now, I had no way of knowing this outside of the fact that my mental health fell apart. So usually when your mental health falls apart, what do you address or try to fix? Your mind, right? Because you think that your mind is where the destruction occurred initially. But where it really began was the body. So your container filled and filled and filled and filled until something snapped. It was at capacity, no more. So you don't have any more space for any more material to go inside. This triggers overflow into the mind. The mind begins to essentially fall apart. This is when we're met with awful thoughts, racing thoughts, looping thoughts, ruminating, fear, just feeling chaotic, like you're not in control anymore. And this is what happened to me. So all the mental work I was trying to do wasn't fixing the problem. Me just, as so many Christians and people were like, this is warfare. You need to pray it away. Praying it away didn't do anything. I spent days and weeks fasting. I did everything by the book, and to no avail. The symptoms were still there. And then after my mental health went, my physical health went, because my body was so at capacity. This was falling apart. So your body sort of just follows suit. And everywhere that those stored emotions, stored traumas, everything that's been hidden, it begins to need a voice. It begins to need to get your attention. And this is what physical symptoms in the body are. As far as cancer goes, usually it's trauma or a high stress event that triggers cancer cells to develop and multiply. We all have cancer cells in our body, but there is usually an event or something that turns them on. So in my case, all of the trauma, all of the battling, all of the being in the high stress environment, all of the fight or flight, all of the cortisol, all of these things going on inside of my body is what turned on not only these genes and cells in my body, but all of the other symptoms as well, like the rashes, the gut issues, the migraines, the mental health stuff. So allowing, the only thing that was able to shift me out of this mental state and physical state was allowing. Allowing does not mean feeding. They're two different things. Allowing is when you drop from your mind back into your body. So you bring your awareness into your physical body and you begin to feel the sensations that live in your system. See, a lot of times when that container begins to fill, we check out of our body, or even as children, we were taught to dissociate from the body and go into the mind. So we're unaware of the sensations and the things that are going on inside of us. And so we avoid, we distract, we push away from these things because they feel very uncomfortable. So dropping into the body, you're going to be met with a lot of really uncomfortable sensations in your gut, in your chest, in your belly. It could be anywhere. And not to mention the physical actual symptoms that you have as a result of your container being full. So by being with those sensations without pushing them away, without judging them, but allowing yourself to feel them as a neutral energy, meaning you are not fearing what's coming up inside of you, and you're not feeding it by attaching to it. You are allowing it to flow through you so it can complete its energetic charge. That is the only way to begin to clear the backlog of what has been in our body that has been unprocessed. So your symptoms are a result of having a full backlog of material in your physical body. So by dropping into your body and allowing whatever is there to be there with no judgment, no shame, no mentally trying to analyze it and figure it out, just being this space in which it can express itself, is the key to healing. Now, this is not a quick fix. This is something that can take many months, many years to complete and to begin to clear and chip away at that backlog. And so it took some time to begin to see great changes, but almost immediately, within a week, even, though I was doing all the right diets, I was eliminating all the right foods, I was following every medical protocol you could follow to clear the diverticulitis, to clear the histamine responses, to avoid the mold, to do all of these things that we do in the physical. You can do all of these things and still not heal. And if you're wondering, if you've done all of these things and you're wondering, why am I not healing? It's because you are missing this piece. The symptoms are a result of the repressed emotion and trauma and parts of ourselves. And so the only way to fully clear the symptom is to be the awareness around it and to give it the space to express itself. And that's all the symptom was the alarm saying, hey, I need to get your attention down here in the body. You need to process this. You need to be the safe space in which this can finish. And so it can clear from the body. And so allowing is not latching onto necessarily an emotion. It's not saying, oh, I'm feeling grief, and then thinking about all of the things that have made you to feel grief in your life, and then attaching to the story, and then, oh, you're sobbing and you're crying for days and you're depressed. That's not what it is. You might be able to recognize what the emotion is that you're clearing, whether it be anger, whether it be, grief. You might be able to see it as that, as it bubbles up and comes through to be expressed. But you don't have to attach to it. And you don't even have to know what the emotion is. It's more or less the physical sensation that you are allowing to come up to be released. And so as an example of this, when I first started doing my allowing, I could feel a lot of energy in my lower belly. So like where your solar plexus would be, or below your solar plexus. So like in your womb area, I would feel a lot of really intense, almost like burny energy where it's just like, oh, like vibrating. And I could tell it almost felt angry. And sometimes it would trigger angry thoughts. And so I had to be careful not to connect to the thoughts and go down the whole loophole, but just to be with the feeling and the sensation and not attach story to it, and not go into my past and try to analyze it. So this is the difference. Like a lot of people will go to therapy. A therapist will bring up a lot of those stories. And some people might say that it's helpful. And some people say it makes them feel like they're just reliving their trauma over and over again, but there's never really any resolve. And that's because it's stored in your body. And there are somatic feelings that need to be felt in order for these things to be cleared from our system. And that's what allowing does. It allows you to connect somatically to your body and to allow whatever is there to be there without pushing it away, without further suppressing it, without judgment. And so the allowing for me has been, in the first week, like I said, it cleared, most of my negative thoughts were gone in 1 week. And after that, I started noticing, like another week after that, my gut issues had vanished. And before, they would come and go and come and go and come and go, and I think I'd had it handled, and then it would come back again. It vanished and was resolved. And my gut doctor had previously told me, you are going to have to be on medication for the rest of your life, and wrote me a prescription that I never filled and I never decided to take because I knew that taking a pill for the rest of my life was not the answer. I knew what had put me in the position that I had found myself in. And so I knew that healing had to be possible. Experiencing the opposite of what I had previously experienced had to do something for my system. And I was very aware of energy work and things of that nature. And so I knew there was a way. I was determined, and God eventually led me to the very thing that was going to help my body to heal. So as my gut issues began to heal, then further down the road, I started noticing my skin was clearing up. No more petechia and rashes on my face. My histamine responses were lessening. I was able to eat foods that were previously really triggering to me. However, I was still in the environment that was generating a lot of the abuse, a lot of the trauma. And so my cortisol levels were still high. So as I was trying to balance out, there were still things. So it was kind of keeping me stuck. And I would notice that as a bad argument ensued or something that was really heartbreaking happened, I would sort of spiral back down into a bad place and then have to come out of it and heal. And this was really incredibly challenging for me. As far as the cancer end of it went, there were a couple times when I was so ill right before I had left. 2025, I would say I had brushes with death multiple times, at least 4-5 times. And God pulled me out of that place every single time. And so this is what I wanted to share about how I was able to do that. So the allowing was, and then being still in that environment was creating a lot of I don't want to say the allowing was creating the unsettled feelings, but just the environment that I was still in. And I was still trying to get a handle on how I was allowing, if I was doing it right, if, and sometimes it would, I would re-spiral or go into the story. And so I have so much information about how to allow and just what to avoid. But, I would find myself in just a really bad space where it's all my energy gone. I couldn't move off the couch. I could feel it moving into my lungs and my esophagus. And so it was really incredibly scary. So on top of the allowing, I started doing another practice that I was sort of intuitively just led to do because I knew energy. And so when I was in a bad place, I would lay down and turn on some really soft music. And I would spend time with God, one-on-one, me and God. And I would envision Jesus being with me and holding me and touching me and healing me. And I would think of happy memories, things that I've experienced in life. So I would go into a very positive mental state. So whether this meant envisioning happy things I want to experience in the future, or things that I had previously experienced in life that were really joyful and beautiful, or I would focus in my mind on my children and my love for them, and then also God. And so my heart would expand and I would feel, you can literally feel the warmth, the magnetic field around your heart just expanding. And I would stay in that state as long as I possibly could. And within a day or two, I would be off the couch. My lungs would be clear again. And so divine healing is 100% real and it's attainable by everybody. And this is just an example of how I would do it. And so a perfect schedule for dealing with your trauma would also include not only the periods of time where you are consciously in your body allowing whatever material needs to come up and clear, but you are also spending a chunk of time in your day to flood your body with the happy hormones. So the serotonin, the dopamine, oxytocin. And you do this by doing what I just described, by spending that time with God, by going into your heart space and expanding it, just being with it. And you can use whatever works for you. For me, music was a great way to sort of keep the feeling going because I would connect to the instrumental music and it would just feel so beautiful and profound inside of my body. And so I was using sound healing. That's a thing. It helps you to connect and to heal your body. I would listen to different frequencies. I would listen to Jeremy Soleil. I love his classical music. I would listen to worship music. I would listen to anything that just made me expand in my heart. And so this paired with the allowing, paired with very specific diet and supplement things, I was able to pull myself out of some very, very dark places. And here I am sitting here talking to you today, only close to 3 months removed from the situation and just making profound progress in my healing, in my nervous system, in my body and in my mind. And God is so good. And He led me through the entire process because He wanted, I fully believe, that my purpose is to help other people heal, to help other people understand their worth and their value, to help other people understand that miracles are not just for select few. They are available to you all the time. And God loves you so much. And although I went through absolute hell at the hands of other people, through the abuse that I experienced, through even just negative life circumstances and traumatic things that happened outside of relationship, but I have been able to overcome and to withstand what felt like walking through absolute hell. When my mental health fell apart, God made it very clear to me that that is a space in which a lot of people don't return. Number one, they either don't know how to heal and they unalive themselves, which the thought came to me a couple different times because of the intensity of what I was experiencing. Or number two, they end up in a psych ward or mental institution and labeled as, unfit. Or, they just give up. And He kept pushing me. This isn't where you are going to stay. This isn't the end of your story. And so He guided me through the entire process, the entire healing journey, through all of the abuse, all of the trauma. He was giving me the dreams. He was giving me the direction. And He eventually led me to the very thing that was going to pull me away from death's door. And so when He says, as you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. I had a fear. I did have fear sometimes, but I was always able to overcome with God. So with my faith and with the hope that His words would ring true and that He would restore me. One of the dreams that He gave me during this process, I saw the word Lazarus. And so to me, that was His promise to me that He was going to restore me. And I didn't walk that path just to go about life as scheduled, without turning around to help those who are now in similar situations or who are in need of healing. And so He gave me the perfect formula. I promise you, do some digging, do some research into mind-body conditions, even if it's something like cancer, because cancer feeds on trauma. It is perpetuated by trauma, by anger, by repressed emotions. And so by healing these parts of ourselves, we heal our body as a whole. We can heal these diseases that we were previously told were uncurable or impossible to heal. And I have done all of this without medical help. Originally, I was going to doctors and I was trying to figure out what was going on, and wasn't getting the answers I needed, or people were shoving pills at me, and I knew that this wasn't the answer. And so it is completely and 100% possible for your body to heal. Your body knows how to heal. It knows how to heal. We just have to give it the right circumstances in which it can heal. So I wanted to explain how allowing works, sort of just how trauma, how our life experiences begin to fill that container until it begins to be too much. And then that's when the symptoms start. And then the answer, the key to resolving them, whether it's mentally, spiritually, physically, is to somatically go into the body and to allow everything that's been repressed to express itself through us. And we can be that safe and loving container, that safe space in which this can happen. And this is true healing. I love you guys. God bless.